27th of June, 1942, 6:15 in the evening, Fjord, Anchorage, Iceland. Grey water rolled under a low ceiling of cloud as merchant vessels formed columns inside the sheltered fjord. Tugboats moved slowly through the cold mist, pushing freighters into their assigned lanes. Each ship carried cargo that the Soviet Union urgently needed. Crates marked with stenciled letters filled the holds: American M3 Stuart light tanks, British Hurricane fighter aircraft packed in wooden frames, trucks, fuel drums, artillery shells, and machine tools. The convoy designation was Convoy PQ-17. 35 merchant ships would sail north into the Barents Sea. Their destination was Arkhangelsk in the Soviet Union, more than 2,000 miles away across some of the harshest waters on Earth. The strategic objective was simple but critical. The Soviet Union had been fighting Operation Barbarossa for more than 1 year. Soviet industry had been relocated east of the Ural Mountains, but the Red Army still depended heavily on Allied supplies. Without trucks, fuel, aluminum, and explosives from Britain and the United States, Soviet counteroffensives would slow dramatically. The Arctic route was the fastest supply line. It was also the most dangerous. At 7:30 in the evening, the convoy commander, Captain John Dowding of the British Royal Navy, reviewed the formation plan aboard the escort destroyer HMS Keppel. The convoy would move in 9 columns, 4 ships in each column, distance between ships, 500 yards, speed, 8 knots. The outer defensive ring included 6 destroyers and 4 corvettes equipped with ASDIC sonar for submarine detection. Inside that ring moved the merchant ships, slow and heavily loaded. Farther out at sea waited the heavy escort group. 2 British cruisers, HMS London and HMS Norfolk, carried 8-inch naval guns designed to repel German surface raiders. Beyond them operated a distant covering force that included the powerful battleship HMS Duke of York. The entire system was layered like armor: destroyers for submarines, cruisers for surface ships, battleships to counter the most feared threat in the Arctic, the German battleship Tirpitz. German naval intelligence monitored Arctic convoy movements closely. If Tirpitz sailed from the Norwegian fjords, even a single strike could destroy dozens of slow merchant vessels. This possibility shaped every Allied decision. At 9:15 that night, signal lamps flashed across the water. The convoy began to move. Engines vibrated through steel hulls as anchors lifted from the seabed. One by one, merchant ships turned north and exited Fjord. Among them sailed the American Liberty ship SS Christopher Newport. Its cargo included aviation fuel and crates containing P-40 fighter aircraft components. Nearby steamed the British freighter SS Empire Byron, loaded with trucks and artillery ammunition. Temperatures hovered just above freezing. Even in summer, the Arctic air cut through heavy coats. The first 2 days passed without contact. Convoy speed remained steady at 8 knots. Destroyers conducted zigzag patrols ahead of the formation. Sonar operators listened through headphones for the distinctive echo of a submerged submarine hull. German U-boats were already hunting. By the evening of the 1st of July, reconnaissance aircraft from the German Luftwaffe located the convoy. The report reached the command center of Adolf Hitler Naval Command in occupied Norway. German planners activated an attack operation involving several forces: U-boats from the 7th U-boat Flotilla, Heinkel, He-111 torpedo bombers from Luftwaffe Group KG-26, and possibly, if the situation allowed, the battleship Tirpitz. The Arctic environment itself added another enemy. Cold fog rolled across the convoy lanes. Ice floes drifted unpredictably. Radar equipment of the time struggled to detect low-flying aircraft in heavy weather. Visibility sometimes dropped below 1 mile. At 11:45 on the night of the 2nd of July, a lookout aboard the destroyer HMS Leamington spotted a dark silhouette on the horizon, a German submarine. The first attack followed minutes later. A torpedo slammed into the side of the American freighter SS Christopher Newport. Flames shot upward as aviation fuel ignited. The convoy had been found. Within hours, more submarines would arrive. Above them, Luftwaffe bombers prepared to launch from northern Norway. And somewhere inside a narrow Norwegian fjord, the guns of the battleship Tirpitz waited for orders to sail. If that battleship entered the convoy route, the entire mission could collapse. But an even more dangerous decision was approaching inside the British Admiralty in London. One signal would soon scatter the convoy across the Arctic Ocean and leave 35 merchant ships alone in the path of German attack. 4th of July, 1942, 9:36 in the evening. Admiralty War Room, London. Teleprinters rattled along the walls of the underground operations center. Naval officers studied intelligence summaries arriving from aircraft reconnaissance and signals intercept units. One report carried urgent markings. German surface forces in northern Norway appeared to be preparing for sea operations. British intelligence believed the battleship Tirpitz might soon sortie into the Barents Sea. The ship displaced more than 50,000 tons and carried 8 15-inch guns. Each shell weighed nearly 2,000 pounds. At a distance of 20 miles, those guns could tear apart a merchant ship with a single hit. For slow Arctic convoys, Tirpitz represented a strategic nightmare. The escort cruisers guarding convoy PQ-17 were powerful but outmatched. A direct engagement would likely destroy the escort group and expose every merchant vessel. At 10:11 in the evening, the first Sea Lord, Dudley Pound, reviewed the latest intelligence estimate. German naval forces were reported leaving the Norwegian port of Trondheim. The possibility of a battleship interception appeared real. Pound faced a brutal decision: protect the merchant ships by keeping them together under escort, or disperse them to reduce the damage if Tirpitz attacked. At 10:23 in the evening, the order went out. Signal traffic reached the convoy flagship minutes later. The message contained two short commands: cruisers withdraw westward, convoy scatter. At 11:15 that night, the signal reached the destroyers escorting the convoy. The order stunned many officers. Scattering removed the protective formation that had shielded the ships from submarine attacks. Individual freighters would now sail alone through submarine-infested waters. However, the Admiralty believed a concentrated convoy would become an easy target for the guns of Tirpitz. Destroyer captains passed the message to merchant captains through signal lamps and radio. Within 30 minutes, the convoy formation dissolved. Ships began turning in different directions across the dark Arctic Sea. Some moved north, some turned east toward Novaya Zemlya, others headed southeast toward the Soviet coast. Escort destroyers pulled away as well, following orders to withdraw westward. Within 2 hours, 35 merchant vessels were alone in open water. German reconnaissance aircraft noticed the change immediately. At 4:30 in the morning on the 5th of July, a Luftwaffe Heinkel, he, 111 torpedo bomber from Kampfgeschwader 26, spotted a lone merchant ship struggling through heavy waves. The target was the American freighter SS William Hooper. The bomber descended to less than 100 feet above the water. A torpedo dropped into the sea and ran straight toward the hull. Impact came 20 seconds later. The explosion tore open the engine room. Steam pipes burst. The ship began to settle by the stern within minutes. Across hundreds of miles of ocean, other scattered ships faced the same danger. German U-boats moved quickly to intercept. One of them, German submarine U-703, tracked another isolated freighter during the early afternoon. The target was the American cargo ship, SS Pancraft. At 2:40 in the afternoon, U-703 fired 2 torpedoes from a distance of 800 yards. Both struck. The freighter rolled sharply to port before disappearing beneath the surface. By the evening of the 5th of July, the scattered convoy resembled a broken trail across the Arctic. German command centers in Norway recognized the opportunity immediately. Submarine commanders received new instructions: attack every isolated ship. Luftwaffe bombers began flying continuous patrols from bases near Banak and Kirkenes. The Arctic environment added to the chaos. Heavy fog banks formed suddenly across the Barents Sea. Visibility sometimes dropped to only a few hundred yards. Navigational errors became common. Several merchant ships drifted dangerously close to Arctic ice fields. One freighter, the British vessel SS Empire Tide, reported pack ice closing around the hull during the night. The captain slowed engines to avoid damaging the propeller. This delay made the ship easier to find. Shortly after midnight on the 6th of July, a German reconnaissance aircraft spotted the vessel and transmitted coordinates to nearby submarines. The Arctic convoy had effectively become dozens of separate targets. Meanwhile, the British Admiralty waited for confirmation that the battleship Tirpitz had sailed, but hours passed, then a full day. No attack came. Inside the Norwegian fjords, German naval commanders had hesitated. The operation involving Tirpitz had been delayed by uncertain reconnaissance reports and concerns about Allied submarines. The most feared threat that triggered the scattering order had not even reached the convoy route. By the time this reality became clear, the damage was already unfolding across the Barents Sea. And the worst attacks were still ahead. German submarines and bombers were closing in on the scattered ships one by one. In the cold Arctic darkness, several captains began sending desperate radio signals. They reported torpedo wakes in the water, enemy aircraft circling overhead, and no escort ships within hundreds of miles. The convoy had not simply scattered. It had been abandoned in one of the most dangerous oceans on Earth. 7th of July, 1942, 3:20 in the morning. Barents Sea, 200 miles north of Norway. A lookout aboard the British freighter SS Empire. Byron stared into a wall of blowing snow. The ship moved slowly through heavy waves, making just 7 knots as its overloaded engines struggled against the Arctic current. Empire Byron had once been part of convoy PQ-17. Now it sailed alone. Cargo filled the holds: field artillery ammunition, crates containing aircraft engines, fuel drums strapped to wooden pallets. The mission objective remained unchanged: deliver war material to the Soviet port of Arkhangelsk. But the strategic situation had collapsed. Without escort destroyers or convoy formation, each ship had become an independent target. German forces were now executing a coordinated search across hundreds of miles of sea. U-boats formed patrol lines south of the convoy routes. Luftwaffe bombers conducted long-range sweeps from airfields in northern Norway. At 4:15 in the morning, a shadow passed low across the cloud cover above Empire Byron. The sound arrived seconds later. Twin engines, a Heinkel. He won 11 torpedo bomber from German Luftwaffe unit KG-26. The aircraft descended through the clouds until it flew barely 50 feet above the waves. The bomber crew had spotted the merchant ship against the pale reflection of the Arctic sky. Inside the cockpit, the bombardier aligned the torpedo sight. Distance, 800 yards. At 4:18, the torpedo dropped. A thin wake cut through the dark water toward the hull of Empire Byron. Lookouts on deck shouted warnings. The captain ordered engines hard to port. The ship attempted to turn, but a freighter loaded with thousands of tons of cargo could not maneuver quickly. Impact came 17 seconds later. The explosion ripped open the number 2 cargo hold. Flames spread across stacked fuel barrels. Within minutes, the ship began to list heavily. Nearby, another merchant vessel faced a similar attack. The American Liberty ship SS Daniel Morgan had been trying to navigate around drifting ice fields during the night. At 5:40 in the morning, a German submarine surfaced less than 2,000 yards away. The submarine was German submarine U-88, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Heino Bowman. The commander chose a surface attack. In Arctic waters, surfaced submarines often moved faster than the slow merchant ships they hunted. At 5:43, U-88 fired a spread of 2 torpedoes. The first passed under the bow, the second struck near the stern. The blast shattered the propeller shaft and flooded the engine room. Daniel Morgan stopped dead in the water. Within 15 minutes, the ship slipped beneath the surface. Across the scattered convoy routes, similar attacks unfolded hour after hour. German aircraft dropped bombs from low altitude. Submarines fired torpedoes from ambush positions between ice floes. Some ships attempted to hide inside fog banks. Others steered north toward Arctic ice fields to escape detection. But cold weather created new dangers. Sea spray froze onto deck railings and gun mounts. Ice accumulated along the superstructure. Several ships developed severe stability problems as frozen weight increased above the waterline. One Soviet-bound freighter, the British ship SS Empire Tide, became trapped in heavy pack ice on the 8th of July. The engines ran continuously to break free. Smoke rising from the funnel revealed the position. Within hours, a German reconnaissance aircraft reported the coordinates. Torpedo bombers arrived the next morning. By the 10th of July, the scale of the disaster was becoming clear. Out of 35 merchant ships that had left Iceland, 24 had been destroyed. Hundreds of trucks, tanks, and aircraft never reached the Soviet front. Strategically, the loss had consequences far beyond the Barents Sea. The Red Army depended on Allied vehicles for logistics. American trucks transported artillery ammunition. British aircraft reinforced Soviet fighter regiments. Every lost ship meant fewer supplies reaching the Eastern Front during the critical summer of 1942. And yet a small number of ships continued eastward. Several captains chose a dangerous route along the northern edge of Novaya Zemlya. Ice fields there created natural cover from German patrol aircraft. Navigation was slow and hazardous, but it offered a chance of survival. On the 28th of July, the final survivors of the convoy entered the Soviet port of Arkhangelsk. 11 ships had reached their destination. The rest lay scattered across the Arctic seabed. The disaster forced immediate changes in Allied strategy. Future Arctic convoys would sail with stronger escorts. Aircraft carriers would provide fighter cover. And the fear of German surface raiders such as Tirpitz would be balanced against the catastrophic risk of scattering a convoy. The Arctic route remained vital for the rest of the war. But the events of July 1942 proved a harsh truth. In the polar seas, the enemy was not only submarines and aircraft. It was distance, cold, isolation, and a single command signal that could change the fate of an entire fleet.